Toby's an amazing woman who has seen the dark side and come out on the light side. And like most women, have intense stories to share.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Courageous stories to share. I think that's always the word that I think of when I think of Toby, because to have the courage to share her story, a story that I think has the potential for people to really judge if they don't really hear the whole story. And for you to have the willingness and the courage to continue to share that story with the intention that you have to really lead women to healing and realignment and power, it's a beautiful thing it's a privilege. I feel very privileged to be able to be part of supporting you in sharing that message. So
thank you.
And we met you through Alexa, I think.
Yes, you did.
Oh,
good. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
totally.
cool. So a minute ago it said that I was turned off. So I just want to be sure.
We had to give you permission.
That's right. I did meet you through the Women in Publishing Summit last year.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess I would just ask you to share as much or as little of your story as you're comfortable sharing rather than an introduction.
Okay, cool. So I have a story that almost seems unbelievable, but in 2004, I started a prison dog program. And in 2006, I fell in love with one of my dog handlers and helped him escape from prison. And we were on the run for 12 days and we got caught. Of course, you always get caught. And I got a 27-month prison sentence. Up until that time, I'd never even had a speeding ticket. In fact, I had never even been pulled over. So adjusting to being behind bars was, I didn't think I'd be able to do it. But during that time behind bars, I realized that my entire life I'd been in a prison, and now I was free by being in prison. So it was kind of an odd situation, but I spent all that time really looking at every event in my life and kind of breaking it down to see how I reacted to each one of them and figuring out where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be and what I needed to change and become if I wanted to accomplish that. So I started writing a book while I was in prison, and it was 16 years ago, by the way. 16 years ago, last Saturday was the escape. I started writing a book in prison, and then I got out of prison, and for 10 years, I just kind of wrote more stuff and puddled pages around, and I didn't have a clear vision to what I wanted to do. And when I went to Alexa's seminar, I had put together what I thought was a book. And when I started talking to the people at Gracepoint and was accepted into their publishing pool, they took a look at what I had written, and we edited it several times. And then, this light went on, and they were like, why don't you write this story, which is the story of Toby, the story of how Toby grew and developed, and forget about, the prison escape and the car chase and all that dramatic stuff, but let's restructure your story. And so I've spent the last 2 months, I'm not kidding you, I've been writing on this book for 15 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Since Christmas. And I even wake up in the middle of the night because I think of something I need to put in it, and I come out here and start working on it again. But today I finished it.
Yay! Wow, look at that big announcement.
So I am so excited. And through this writing, I fell in love with myself. And I never was there before, but and as I read it, and I have this wonderful author pod because of the Women in Publishing Summit last year. Alexa put us into pods at random, and I was in a pod with 5 other women who are writing memoirs. And our assignment was to meet every week for like 2 months and help. We are still meeting every week for 2 hours, and it's been a year now, which that value was just priceless. And so, I've been sharing with my pod sisters my story, and they've been, reading parts of it and offering me input. But today I finally finished it, and we just had a meeting before this call, was our weekly meeting, and I told them that I felt like my book now was a love story. And it was a love story between me and my mom, me and my dad, me and myself, and it was a love story between John and I, which started this whole journey. And they all agreed. And, I think it's turned into something beautiful and something I'm so proud of, and something that I didn't have a year ago. So, and I feel like the Women in Publishing Summit put me on this path and put me in the arms of this author pod who's been unbelievably supportive, and introduced me to Gracepoint. And Gracepoint was the catalyst who had the courage to stand up and tell me, well, that's pretty good, but what if you do it this way? And so it was a huge change, but it was exactly what I needed. And I'm in love with my book now. And I'm in love with the cover that I hope we use. So it's just been an unbelievable completion of this vision and this journey that I've had for 16 years now.
Sorry, I'm not crying. Are you crying, Michelle? I'm definitely not crying.
So I think everybody, and anyone who's interested, you can Google Toby or stories out there.
It is.
I think the piece that I really want people to hear is you've been working on this a long time, and you didn't give up. And when the time was right and the stars aligned, or the light bulb went in, or you broke open your heart, or whatever you want to call it, click, 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 it changed and fell into place.
Yes.
And that's how books happen.
Yes.
That's
And I can see, if I had tried to publish this 2 years ago, 5 years ago, all these times I thought I was ready, it would have just been nothing, so
a good book.
Yeah. Well, not as good as it is now.
Wait I haven't read it in like so
yeah.
So I think the other thing that really stands out for me in your journey, Toby, is we took your story to our PR agency because we knew this was a big story, and it was a story that along the way has had a lot of notoriety in the press. And they basically came back to us and said, it's been done. It's been done. And they said, is there something else? Because everybody wants to know why. And nobody, and you really never talked about the why. And in fact, you sent me a video recently, or sent out a video to us recently, where you were featured with a New York Times, New York Times journalist.
Yes.
He was so wanted to go back and revisit your story, because he was like, why? And I think it's such a great example of not only the fact that you were like, oh, well, I didn't think about the why. Let me write the why. And secondly, also just in terms of the writing process, recognizing that, so you worked on this book for 16 plus years, and yet the juice of the book and the brilliance of the book came almost in the rewriting process and not in the writing process.
That's exactly right.
And I always like to hear that, even though honestly, it's not always fun to do the rewriting part. That's the hard part, right? But so many times, I think as writers, we don't realize, first of all, that rewriting is always the place where you go from an okay book to wow, this is genius, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, it's often in the collaboration that comes from working with editors. In your story, we have all read, the entire Gracepoint team, we've been sharing chapters and going back and forth with this. I mean, it's been a collaborative process to say, Toby, we see something here that's way bigger than you're seeing for yourself.
Yes.
We were holding the space for you,
Yes.
and really giving you that opportunity to step into that collaborative piece beyond your pod. I mean, obviously you've had a lot of support along the way, which I think is so powerful, but and also recognizing the publishing process, you kind of step into a team of people that are automatically going to be saying, got your hand on your back, keep going. We're going to take you from to wow. Wow.
That's true. And I think I heard Michelle say earlier that, if you went with a big publisher, they just don't have the bandwidth to really focus on your story. And I feel like that's the brilliance of what I needed, because you and Karen and Lexi and so many people at Gracepoint have spent hours talking to me and encouraging me and suggesting and pushing. And and I got off the phone one night with my husband, and I think I'd been on the phone with Michelle for like 2 hours that day. And I said, what other publisher could I have gone with where the owner of the company would spend 2 hours talking to me on the phone about my book? Because I don't think that happens everywhere. And I feel like, to me, my book is a priority, and it is everything I've been working on for so long. But I also feel like you have owned that too. And so, at Gracepoint, I feel like my book is just as important to you as it is to me. And I don't think I would have found that anywhere else, or maybe somewhere else, but I'd had to look a long time. But that's really the value that I feel I've gotten from Gracepoint. Yeah.
Thank you for all the encouragement coming through
Yeah.
chat for Toby. And some people wanted to see your cover and whatnot. We're not quite ready to share from our end because we're going to tweak it. But I think you're on some social media. You have an email list. People can follow you. Put it all in the chat, Toby, so people can just sign up directly with you and follow your story and know when the book comes out so they can buy your book.
And so that they can be connected to your mission, because you have a really, your book is tied to a really big mission. And
yes, it is.
And
I didn't even mention that, but I have kind of taken, I realized that all the work that I did while I was in prison was something that I was capable of doing because of my background. I mean, I was college educated, I'd had a corporate job, but most of the women in prison are not in that situation. So I decided, I realized that being in prison, I had all this time I had to do, but that time was a gift to me because I didn't have any deadlines. I didn't have any responsibilities. So for 27 months, I got to just sit and be with me and work through myself. And you don't have time to do that out here in this crazy world. And so I look at that 27 months as a gift. And I thought, if I could show that to women who are in prison now and help them take the steps to start working through their backgrounds and their lives, then that could be worth something. So I created some workbooks, initially with women in prison in mind, but they've kind of expanded since then too. So, yeah.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you.